1945. The war is ending. The Third Reich is collapsing. But inside a hidden facility, something impossible is left behind. Blueprints, diagrams, aircraft so advanced they shouldn't exist. Circular crafts, silent propulsion, designs decades ahead of their time. Then Nazi scientists vanish. But their research, it doesn't. Because just 2 years later, in 1947, something new appears in the skies. And what happened next was erased from history. April 1945. The Third Reich is collapsing. The Allies are closing in. But deep inside a hidden facility, buried beneath the Bavarian mountains, something is left behind. Steel doors stand sealed shut. Desks are overturned. The air is thick with dust, as if the entire facility was abandoned in an instant. On the walls, strange symbols, papers scattered across the floor, and on a large wooden table, a blueprint. It shows something impossible. A circular craft, no visible engines, strange markings around the rim, a design that, at least according to conventional history, should not exist in 1945. The Allies seize everything: schematics, research documents, even mechanical parts. But before they can take it all, the scientists are gone, the files missing, and the technology that could change the world vanished. What was the Third Reich building? And more importantly, where did it all go? To understand what happened in those final days of World War II, we need to go back further. Before the war, before the bunkers, back to the very foundation of the Nazi ideology. Because Hitler wasn't just obsessed with military dominance, he believed in something far stranger. He believed in the occult. The Annennabe, a secret Nazi research organization, was created for one purpose: to uncover lost knowledge, ancient civilizations, mystical artifacts, hidden sciences, anything that could give the Third Reich an advantage. They sent expeditions to Tibet, searching for traces of a lost Aryan civilization. They scoured the Middle East for the Spear of Destiny, an artifact believed to grant invincibility. They even investigated ancient Hindu texts that described flying machines, vimanas, that moved without traditional propulsion. And then something changed. In the late 1930s, deep inside Nazi research labs, rumors began circulating. Scientists were working on something impossible. The project's name? Die Glocke, the bell. Die Glocke was allegedly one of the Reich's most classified projects. A machine so advanced, its very existence defies explanation. It was shaped like a massive metallic bell, filled with a mysterious, glowing substance called Cerium 525. Scientists claimed it could manipulate gravity itself. And what makes Die Glocke so terrifying is what happened to those who worked on it. Reports say that several scientists who stood too close died instantly. Their bodies aged decades in a matter of minutes. Others report a strange distortion in time and space. And here's where it gets even stranger. In 1945, as the war ended, Die Glocke disappeared. Officially, the project never existed. But if that's true, why did so many of its scientists vanish too? While Die Glocke was rumored to manipulate gravity, another Nazi project took this idea even further: the Honebu crafts. The classified documents from post-war investigations reveal something shocking: drawings of advanced flying craft labeled as the Honebu series. These weren't ordinary planes, they were saucer-shaped. They had no visible propellers, and they looked eerily similar to modern-day descriptions of UFOs. Could it be? Could the Nazis have been on the verge of building the world's first anti-gravity craft? Official historians dismiss these files as post-war fabrications. But if that's the case, how do we explain what happened just 2 years later? July 1947. 2 years after Nazi scientists vanish, something appears over Roswell, New Mexico. A flying craft, saucer-shaped, crashes in the desert. At first, the government claims it's a weather balloon, but years later, declassified files suggest otherwise. And what happened next would change history forever. July 1947. The war is over, but in the skies above America, something impossible is happening. A farmer stumbles upon metallic wreckage in the desert outside Roswell, New Mexico. Pieces of lightweight metal that snap back into shape when bent. Symbols, strange, unfamiliar markings. At first, the US military confirms what the public already suspects. A flying saucer has crashed in the desert. But within 24 hours, the story changes. It was just a weather balloon, they say. Case closed. But here's the problem. Something else was happening in 1947. Just months before Roswell, the United States had quietly transported hundreds of Nazi scientists into the country. Some were sent to NASA, where they helped America win the space race.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Others, they disappeared into classified military programs, working on projects so secret their very existence was denied for decades. But what's most interesting is where some of them were sent. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio, one of the most heavily classified military research sites in the US. The same base where, according to whistleblowers, some of the Roswell wreckage was taken. Coincidence? Maybe. But here's where things get even stranger. Before 1945, reports of flying saucer were almost non-existent. There were rare, unexplained airship sightings, but nothing like what happened after the war. Then, suddenly, they were everywhere. Between 1947 and 1950, UFO sightings exploded across the United States, Canada, and even South America. Make sure you check our Operation Saucer video, it's right here. Thousands of eyewitnesses, pilots, military officers, civilians, all reported the same thing. Silver, disc-shaped craft moving in ways that defied physics. And it wasn't just civilians. The US Air Force pilots reported dogfights with unknown craft. Objects that outmaneuvered their jets with impossible speed. Some of these pilots vanished without a trace. Their planes found completely intact, with no sign of the crew. Some researchers believe these sightings were directly linked to Nazi UFO projects. They argued that Nazi scientists continued their work either in the US or some secret underground bases. That some of the UFOs spotted after the war weren't alien at all, but the final evolution of Nazi technology. But then there's the other theory, the one that changes everything. That the Nazis weren't just building this craft, they were reverse engineering them. Because declassified files reveal something disturbing. Before the war even started, Nazi officials were investigating something they called the real power. And what they found, it wasn't human. Before the war even started, Nazi officials were looking for something. Not weapons, not land, but knowledge. A power that, according to them, did not originate on Earth. They call it die wahre Macht, the real power, and their search led them to one of the most remote and unexplored places on the planet, Antarctica. In 1938, just 1 year before World War II, Nazi Germany launched an expedition to Antarctica. Led by Admiral Richard, a fleet of ships sailed to the frozen continent, one of the most isolated places on Earth. Their mission? Officially they were mapping the region, but according to some reports, they were looking for something much, much older. What they found remains a mystery. But just a year later, Hitler declared the entire region as part of Nazi Germany, renaming it New Schwabenland. Strange, isn't it? The Third Reich, on the brink of war, sending resources to a frozen wasteland. For what? In 1946, the US launched Operation Highjump, a massive military expedition to Antarctica. The official reason was to test military operations in extreme cold. But some believe that was just a cover story. Leading the mission was Admiral Richard E. Byrd, a decorated US Navy officer and seasoned explorer. But what Byrd later claimed, if the stories are true, was something far beyond military training. According to a highly disputed document known as Byrd's Secret Diary, something impossible happened during one of his Antarctic flights. Byrd allegedly wrote that he encountered a massive opening in the ice, leading to an underground world. Inside, he claimed to have seen lush green valleys, animals unlike anything on Earth, and something else: flying craft. Disc-shaped objects that could move at speeds beyond, you guessed it, anything known at the time. If true, Byrd's discovery raises an even bigger question. What were the Nazis really doing in Antarctica? If Base 211 existed, was it just an underground research facility, or was it built on top of something even older? And then there's what happened next. Operation Highjump was abruptly cut short. The military packed up and left 6 months early. So did Byrd and his men find something they weren't supposed to? And if they did, why was the mission buried in classified reports for decades? Some believe the Nazis weren't just building flying saucers, they were studying them, reverse engineering something they found. There are reports, unverified but persistent, that Nazi officials were obsessed with ancient texts describing encounters with sky gods. That deep in their research they came across something even stranger, clues hidden in Hindu and Tibetan scriptures about flying chariots called Vimanas. Some theorists argued that Nazis' expedition to Tibet and Antarctica were connected, that they were looking for traces of something far older than human civilization. And if that's true, the question isn't whether the Nazis were building UFOs, it's whether they were trying to bring them back. May 1945, the war is over. Nazi Germany has fallen, but as the Allied forces sweep through Berlin, something is missing. Hundreds of top Nazi scientists, including those working on advanced propulsion and anti-gravity research, vanish without a trace. Some defect to the United States, others to the Soviet Union, but a few are never seen again. What happened to them? And more importantly, what happened to their research? After the war, the world was divided. The US and the Soviet Union were no longer allies. They were rivals, and both sides wanted the same thing: Nazi technology. This was Operation Paperclip, the US government's secret program to recruit Nazi scientists. Officially, it was about rocket research, but among the 1,600 men brought to America, some had worked on something else. According to declassified files, at least a dozen paperclip scientists were involved in experimental aircraft and propulsion systems. But after their arrival in the US, their records were altered. Their Nazi past was erased, and their projects sealed under top-secret classifications. And here's where things get strange. Just a few years later, something appears in the sky. Between 1947 and 1955, UFO sightings explode across the world. Witnesses report disc-shaped craft moving at impossible speeds. The US government launches multiple secret studies: Project Sign, Project Grudge, and eventually Project Blue Book. Their goal was to investigate and discredit UFO reports. But what if they weren't studying alien craft at all? What if they were tracking the reappearance of something else? While the US were recruiting Nazi scientists, so was the Soviet Union. But unlike the Americans, they weren't just interested in rockets. KGB files suggest that Soviets obtained classified Nazi propulsion research, and possibly even physical components from abandoned German test sites. In 1952, just a few years after bringing Nazi scientists into their own secret programs, the Soviet Union begins testing disc-shaped aircraft. Officially, these were experimental designs, nothing more. But in 1953, just 1 year later, Stalin orders all research on unconventional aircraft to be shut down immediately. Why? What did they find? Even today, researchers claim that something is hidden beneath the ice of Antarctica. In the 1960s, Soviet spy satellites captured images of massive underground structures buried deep in the Antarctic ice. The location? New Schwabenland. In 2018, a team of scientists detected a mysterious heat source coming from miles beneath ice-frozen wasteland, something that should not be there. And then in 2020, satellite footage appeared to show a massive opening in the ice, just large enough for an aircraft to enter. Could it be? Could Base 211 still exist, hidden beneath the Antarctic ice? And if so, what's down there? The war ended. The world moved on, but the research, the technology, it never disappeared. Governments denied everything, whistleblowers were ignored, and the men who once worked on these projects, they either vanished or were absorbed into something far bigger. The truth wasn't erased, it was repurposed. For decades, the world has debated whether Nazi Germany built UFOs. But that was never the real question. Because if the answers are innocent, if the research was just failed experiments and abandoned projects, then why is every trace of it still classified? Why do governments still refuse to acknowledge what was found beneath Antarctica? The Nazis were obsessed with power, but maybe they weren't the ones who held it. Maybe the knowledge they uncovered, the discoveries they made, weren't meant for them, or for us. And maybe that's why it had to disappear.